A very warm welcome to you, Ms. Sharma. We're very glad to have amongst us Director at Green Gene Environmental Protection and Infrastructure, Priyesh Bhatti. And getting the best out of this conversation, ladies and gentlemen, to masterfully steer into getting all the perspectives out of both the guests. Coming up as a moderator for the chat is Partner and Associate Director at BCG, Mr. Ashish Kulkarni. Okay, I thought a good dose of caffeine wakes you up. Can we have a bigger round of applause for our guest, please? Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Kulkarni.
Well, thank you, ETH, for having invited us. And this is a topic which is of a lot of importance, as well as it's quite complex. As we see that today circularity amongst all the interventions, it is something that is very logical, very much something that comes to us naturally when we look at the nature and when we look at all the things that we do. But at the end of the day, it involves a large spectrum of stakeholders, and across the value chain, several interventions are required to get everything together. And I think today, if we look at some of the statistics, we still are less than 10% circular, and we do have several aspects to circularity when it comes to policy, policy interventions, when it comes to technology interventions. Then we do have a lot of capacity to be built across various stakeholders. Then we do have quite a few aspects of how to bring in the right kind of business model which can actually become viable, as well as bring in that kind of transformational change for, be it a society, be it a municipality, be it a state, and then to a country. So if you look at various stages and various levels of the requirements in circularity, this is something that we as a country have moved ahead in several stances. We do have today the EPR regulations. We'll talk about it a little bit on how the success of this has to take place. We do have also cities coming up with several models. We have a lot of waste to wealth kind of success stories coming up from smaller cities, and this is something that, and there are communities which are getting together to do something which is transformational, again from a perspective of how a nation can go towards a circular economy. And we have been right from ages, we as a country, we are very frugal in terms of how we use resources. But unfortunately, the kind of influence which we are getting from the West, or ways of working we have adopted, that also needs to be thought through. And there are all of these aspects which we will be taking forward in our conversation. We do have with us Pratibha and Pritesh, who have been at the forefront of circular economy, doing things at the ground level. So we'll try and get some very, very interesting nuggets from them to understand how we can implement ourselves. And everyone in this room could also take some of these important aspects and do something about it going forward. And that's our intention coming forward over here, to get everyone to do something about it and make circularity a great success, at least for India. That's our intention. And with that, I would like to start with Pratibha. Pratibha, in your years of experience of working across policymakers as well as communities, I mean, how are things? And first of all, I would like to know more about your work in UNDP and what are the kind of programs which UNDP is going forward with, and any kind of, uh, how do you see circularity coming along?
Thank you so much, Ashish, and thank you, ETH Global Sustainability Alliance team, for having us over for this very interesting conversation. So, Ashish, for UNDP especially, so United Nations Development Program, our entry point to circular economy has been from a very systems lens, and also development has been one of the key focus or the key entry point to the whole issue of circularity. We look at circular economy from three different aspects. One, within the realm of materials management. Second, on addressing informality, because especially in the context of India, we cannot be speaking of circular economy without really the mention and inclusion of informal sector. And the third, from the whole policy, knowledge and systems lens. So as part of this, UNDP has been playing the role of convener, bringing all the stakeholders together. So we have demonstrated, say, business models on how to run a material recovery facility, for example, which we have done in many urban local bodies in partnership with some of the leading private sector like the Coca-Cola, Hindustan Unilever, HDFC Bank. We have worked with CSOs, civil society organizations, social enterprises, and also with waste pickers associations in running pro-poor, sort of models which talks about inclusivity as the basic fundamental background of any program. Recently, we have also started working on something called responsible sourcing framework. We believe while circular economy as a definition and whether it is necessary or not is no more an argument anymore. That's something we have realized, like you mentioned, we have been a very frugal country. Traditionally, we have also been a very circular economy by the nature. We have seen our grandmothers and systems being designed and being worked, but how the circular economy now needs to be implemented is that's where a lot of our energy and focus is. And one of the core principles that we believe should also be incorporated in the circular economy conversation is on the business and human rights aspect. So if we are talking of sourcing of recycled materials or working with various supply chain actors, what are those principles of responsible sourcing that we can speak of, whether it's the elimination of child labor, whether it's the occupational safety of the workers that's involved, whether it's the agency and the autonomy of the workers who can be part of the systems. And there are so many, so we are in the process of developing a framework for that. Besides that, we also work on the materials around the plastics. E-waste is another area where we will be now working on, with the MeitY and the Ministry of, MOEFC in establishing what's in some of the technologies that has already been worked out, but how do we now move from pilots to really scaling up these programs? And then, of course, there is behavior change, wherein we see citizens as one of the key stakeholders. So how do we work along with them in around the concepts of, say, source segregation, understanding circular economy, right, the journey of waste as it starts from our household to where it leads. So these are some, in a nutshell, this is what we've been doing at UNDP, but more to add to this.
Thanks, Pratibha, and that it's a very important thing to have the responsible sourcing to be a part of the entire value chain, and while doing that, also the kind of implementing the policies. That is one thing, but also from a perspective of reviewing it and also monitoring it, bringing in the element of technology to actually tell what works and what doesn't work, the gap analysis. We, for all the audience, we were speaking before we came onto the dais on all these aspects, and I think the role of technology and the role of capacity building cannot be cannot be taken away from as we bring in more and more elements into the value chain, but these elements need to be strengthened, and we'll come to that. Thank you so much for your remarks. I'll come to Priyesh now. Being a person who has been in this field for decades now, and you have built the company ground up from what I've heard before, basically from the perspective of very niche, hard sector like hazardous waste is something that you have worked through, and also from a perspective of waste to wealth and waste to be it energy or any other aspect. What has been your experience, and where do you see how things have worked for you? And I would also uh, understand from you and for the audience as well where things have not worked and why they have not worked and what can be plugged in. So if you can take up some examples from your 2 decades of your wealthy experience, we will all be happy to hear from you. Over to you.
Thank you, Ashish, and good morning, all of you. See, basically, as the title of the program suggests, it is basically that how the circular economy opportunities can revolutionize the growth, right? That is the aspects. And of course, this subject is quite varied, includes a lot of things. So based on whatever our experience and where we intervened, right? How the circular economy has worked, what are the, let us say, good and bad of it, what worked, what didn't work, why it didn't work, what is important. Probably I'll give 2 or 3 examples which probably, let us say, make it little clear. So just to give you a brief, I am going to talk more about from relating waste management and circular economy, right? So most of these 3 examples are related to that. So first is, let us say, as you have said, that we were very active in hazardous waste management and still very active. Initially, our focus was basically cradle to grave treatment disposal, and then later we entered into the subject of that instead of doing treatment and disposal, what are the better method of managing waste, and does it make business sense? Because we finally talk of a growth, solving problem as well as growing. So one of the example in hazardous waste was that we were having a lot of treatment and disposal facilities, we were collecting hazardous waste, we were doing incineration, doing landfills. And after 2008, basically, we started thinking about that, can we do something about recycle, reuse techniques instead of just treatment and disposal? And we intervened in the terms of that hazardous waste can be converted into the fuel and raw materials instead of just treatment and disposal, because it has a lot of things which is usable. And that is how it started, that we started manufacturing alternate fuels and raw materials through a process called pre-processing, and which has resulted in minimizing of incineration, minimizing of landfills, and also providing a useful resource in terms of fuel and in terms of resources, alternate raw materials, to the cement companies and many other sectors. And today I would say that in last 15 years, we have not added on any landfill capacities. We have closed down 80% of our incineration plants, but still we have grown at the speed of 25% annually, and we are manufacturing alternate fuel all across India and supplying it to the cement companies. And we are doing it, one, because it is environmentally better, but also it is economically better. That in this entire supply chain, the generator is getting benefited. We as a business, as a pre-processor, we are getting benefited. Cement company who is utilizing the alternate fuel and raw material in place of a virgin fuel and virgin raw materials, they are also getting benefited. So it is environmentally also sustainable, economically also sustainable. So this is one such example, just what we have experienced and which has worked. Now what has not worked in this? Say for example, when you are replacing an incineration through a pre-processing, co-processing, it is making financial sense because incineration is more expensive than pre-processing and co-processing. But if I have to replace a landfill with pre-processing and co-processing, probably it is not making economic sense. The reason is because landfill is the cheapest waste management method. So suppose if any industry has to, let us say, do away with landfill and let us say do pre-processing, co-processing. Technically it is possible that this material can be converted into the useful materials, cement can use it, but the cost of entire mechanism is more than landfill. So till the landfill cost is not so high, some of this material, even though they are desirable, can be done, but since it is not economically more attractive than landfill, it is not happening. So the industries who have a very solid policy that no, we don't want to do the landfill, they are able to do it. But let us say who give more importance to economic benefits, probably they are not able to do, even though it is possible to do. Right? So this is both aspects. Second aspects, we are doing a lot of work on municipal solid waste, and we are again manufacturing fuel out of municipal solid waste. Now in some of the places where the manufacturing of fuel and the consumption of fuel and entire transportation and logistic of fuel is happening in a manner where it is self-sustainable. It is happening. The technology is same, right? But the same thing where the complete cost is not, let us say, getting limited into a certain rhythm and where the consumption or let us say the consumer is not able to absorb that price, it is not happening. So in both the cases, what I believe is that there is a technology, there is a need, but if something is not viable on its own, it is probably not sustaining, right? So both examples are there. There are success cases and there are failure cases, and largely because it is not self-sustainable. And of course, there are examples on water that we know that, and we are largely working with industries. So there are regions where industries don't have water or the water is very expensive. And let us say completely recycling the water at a cluster level or at regional level and giving back to the industries at a cost which is less expensive than raw water. It is working well. And there are a lot of regions where this is working well. But there are regions where there is a need for recycling of water. Industries want water, but the virgin water is available at a cheaper cost. This is not working. So as per me, there are two aspects. First is that recycled product, whether it is a fuel or a water or anything, it has to be of extremely good quality that the consumer should be able to consume on sustainable basis. And second thing, we should be able to offer that solution at a price where it can sustain. Right? That is my experience.
Thank you. So, price and quality. I think we got a lot of information on what are the things that are working and what things are not working. I think from a perspective of making a business model which works, which is viable on its own, that is very important. I would take away that aspect. And also there are aspects which wherein we bring in innovation. And today, since you're working in industries, we do have a lot of emphasis on industrial symbiosis, and there are quite a few platforms which can be created within the industrial clusters wherein raw materials from waste from one industry can be a raw material for other industries, and there are techniques, technologies, business models which are across the world. And I think if you look at South Korea as well as other, it started from South Korea, and it is now spread to many of the industrial belts. We are also working quite a few with some of the industrial clusters. But I think this is the way to go about it, and bringing in that extra element of push from the government, probably wherever things are on the fence, to bring it to viability, even for a success story or even for a short period of time, is also something that is required. And here I would like to bring in Pratibha. Have you seen places or some examples where things tend to be viable, but wherein a push from the government or push from the community or push from the private sector has helped to bring it to viability and bring it have a transformation? Some example from your end.
Thank you, Ashish, and thank you, Priyesh. In fact, there were a lot of aspects around viability, quality that sort of kept, I could echo with it. Uh, First of all, Ashish, before I answer that question, I would also like to bring forth some light in terms of how do we define viability and how soon do we want to uh, make that pilot or that model viable. And I'm saying this because a lot of the programs or pilots within the circular economy, before it starts giving yields, it will do lot of savings before it will actually give returns. So for instance, when we are setting up an MRF, right, even before the materials are brought from, say, houses to the bulk waste generators to a facility, it is some value addition is done, then it's sent to some recyclers and aggregators. Whenever a company or an investor put in funds, they are like, how soon we will be able to, say, collect 3 tons or 5 tons of material, what will be the value addition, whether any recycled material and would be generated of that. So I think circularity at times, we are too hooked up with the whole compliance and cost about it, rather it looking from the systemic resilience of that program. So for instance, when we are talking about MRF, we are not just talking about movement of material from one point to other. We are talking about behavior change. We are talking about working with urban local bodies. We are talking about various informal actors, bhangarwala, kabadiwala, waste picker, your sweepers, your housekeeping staff, everybody is interacting with that material. So how do we measure the viability or the impact in some of these success metrics also? And these are just some of the metrics. There are some bigger environmental metrics also. For instance, once we start looking at decentralized systems of waste management, the amount of fuel you would save in transportation from that, centralized over the waste producing facilities to, say, landfills or the waste processing facilities. So these are also some of the indicators which we should look at. Now coming back to how policy has enabled, so we have seen I'll speak from some of the policy incentives that has really worked. So for instance, when I started my career, in the waste sector, I started working with this waste pickers cooperative called Swatch in Pune. And at that time, I know the ULB had institutionalized in situ composting as part of all the residential properties bylaws. So for instance, any builder who would build a property, composting pits, having a composting pits was must. So in a way, you are already putting impetus so that all the organic waste is sort of processed in situ at the local level. And similarly, in Bombay, for instance, there is a policy on, property tax rebate. So there are many ULBs who are using some of these policy enablers to help push the circular economy dialogue. Of course, implementation requires more and more effort and participation of all stakeholders, but we have seen similarly from the private sector point of view, right? The entire mechanism of circular economy is the investment in the supply chain. So for instance, when we are working with one of the private sector who is producing a cream, their R&D team had come to see what happens to that tube. So there is a multi-layer packaging, then there is a different plastic material cap, the plastic tube is something different. The recyclers or the people who are working on the field, they know this is not a homogenic material. So can the R&D team take some of these lessons on how the recycling happens on ground and then maybe design the material in a way? So I think it's not, circular economy is also often spoken from a very downstream and recycling lens, but I think it starts much before, right at the thinking level, right at the redesigning level, you know, where we don't even have to talk about waste at the first place. So I hope this answers the question.
Yes, thanks. This is very interesting. So both upstream and downstream angles which you brought in are anyways very important for circularity, and starting from less usage itself rather than after usage, reusing and recycling and recovering is something which is happening as of today. But this is a very interesting angle, and thinking of circularity as a holistically, in a holistic way is very much required by all stakeholders. That missing link probably between how the private sector is looking at it when it comes to viability, when it comes to pricing, quality aspect, and plus from a public good perspective or an environmental benefit perspective, there is also a value associated which doesn't come onto the Excel sheets and our IRRs, but there is a value associated to it. I think the way we need to rethink of our rate of returns from a public point of view, I think there is immense value which needs to be associated with circularity, and if that is brought about, there could be a definitive change in the way we look at things. The time's running out, but I would like to come to Priyesh from a perspective of, with all the experience which you have got, and when we look at circularity, when we look at the complexity of circularity, there is immense, across the value chain, there are a lot of places where one can intervene. So, what are the three key takeaways you would leave the audience with if they have to intervene, if somebody wants to make a change? Look at it holistically, try to intervene at all levels, or pick and choose what you can. Like you also mentioned about the very key aspect of what's viable today, do it today as of now. But that's one aspect of it. I would like to, like you to, like all of us to hear about three key things which we can take and do things going forward.
See, of course, as an individual, as Pratibhaji has said, and also it's in the hierarchy, that prevention is, of course, the first and the most effective way where an individual or the individual industry or individual household can play a major role. Because if you see, per capita consumption of anything, right, if it is controlled, managed, minimized, definitely the downstream challenges will automatically go down. So of course it is the most important aspects. But let us consider a fact that the today's status, today's, let us say, the people we are in India, we have a lot of aspirations, right? And we are actually for further few more years are going to increase the consumptions, there is no doubt. Imagine if a person is having some money, he has not bought a bike in his life, he is definitely going to buy a bike. Once you will become eligible to buy, let us say, car, you are definitely going to buy cars, you are definitely going to go white goods, because we are in that cycle of growth, right? So as per me, for few years, it is very difficult that our waste generation or our resource consumption is going to go down, right? Because actually we are still in that phase of growth, right? But yes, whatever the intervention at individual we can, definitely it is going to, let us say, lower down that curve. Having said that, the load on the downstream resources, whether it is water, waste, and all those things, is definitely going to be there. The good and bad part is that the scale at which our problems are there, the scale at which our waste problems are going to be there, the resource constraints are going to be there. I believe that most of the technology in the world is going to get viable for us. Only thing is, it is going to get times, we have to connect the dots, something government may have to do, something the players like us have to do it, right? Just imagine 79% of our sewage is not even treated in India. And more than 70% part of our country has a water scarcity. And the cost of recycling of sewage in large part of country is less than the price of raw water. So that kind of opportunity is there, right? And we can, I would say, extend it to a lot of other areas. So I would say just because of the scale of the problems, just because of our scarcity and need, there are a lot of opportunities. Only thing is, we may have to probably have a better coordination. I was just telling to the Ashish that sewage is with one government department and supply of water is with another government department, and these two government department is not sitting together. So that kind of problem we have. We don't have resource problem, money problem. We have a lot of collection of GST, right? The days are gone where we have no money. Today most of the corporations, most of the government departments have a lot of money. It is more coordination. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for such rich discussions, both Priyesh and Pratibha. From all of your experience, I hope the audience can take away something for everyone on what they could do as individuals, in the circularity realm. I would say this is a very complex subject for 25-30 minutes, but I hope we did some justice by bringing in some on-the-ground examples and plus such rich experiences and such nuggets. I am very much delighted to have this conversation with you both. Thank you so much for having spent your time, and also thank you ETH again for this wonderful event as well as this panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you to all the panelists for that really compelling discussion. Can we have you together for a group photograph, please? As Mr. Kulkarni said, there were so many learnings that were shared, and I think that made it very clear that circularity is no longer a niche idea. It is, in fact, a business imperative and a national advantage that we should all be focusing on going further.